morning, everybody. Welcome from Woodhall Press. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited. We've got a great lineup for you. We have people joining us from all over the country and the world. So thank you for our friends on the West Coast who are up very early this morning. Hopefully you are drinking your caffeinated beverages from your Woodhall cup. If you haven't received that yet, it should be coming soon. So keep your eyes open for that. We've also got friends on the East Coast. We have people as far away as Canada and India. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So we have, as I said already, we've got an excited lineup for you. We're excited to come together today and learn about our craft and our industry, hopefully make new friendships and professional connections, and maybe even have some fun. I mean, that would be great if that happens. But please enjoy this opportunity. A lot of us have worked for quite a few months to bring you all together, and I think it's going to be wonderful. And yeah, I'll thank everybody who's worked on this at the end. I know nobody's here to hear me speak this morning, so I'll turn it over to our CEO. He's also a writer, editor, teacher, publisher, probably international spy. No, I'm just kidding about the last one. But he pretty much does everything. Dave Legere, he's going to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Becca. And also a big thanks, everybody, to Becca, who has been so instrumental in everything from the swag bags to keeping this train on the tracks. So it's a few words, kind of long words. I apologize. As I was writing this, I was like, well, this is long, but I want to say all of it about Gina because I think it's important. Hailed as smart and funny by people, Gina Barreca was deemed a feminist humor maven by Ms. She has written for most major publications, including the New York Times, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Cosmopolitan, and the Harvard Business Review. Board of Trustees, Distinguished Professor at UConn, as well as winner of its highest award for excellence in teaching. Gina's written 10 books, including If You Lean In, Will Men Just Look Down Your Blouse? It's Not That I'm Bitter, Babes in Boyland, A Personal History of Coeducation in the Ivy League, and the best-selling They Used to Call Me Snow White, But I Drifted. You can find her in the Library of Congress or the makeup aisle at Walgreens. For more information, visit her at ginabarreca.com. Of course, that's her official bio. But what you don't know about Gina is that she's one of the kindest people you'll ever meet. In fact, I met Gina when I was a scared, quiet English major at UConn. And she pulled me out of my shell by making me sometimes begrudgingly share writing with the class, talk in front of the class, and to understand that while writing can be a solitary experience, that experience is exactly why we need to pull ourselves out of the universes we create on the page to experience the universe around us. And that's why we're here today. We're writers that want to connect with one another and grow not only as writers, but as people. Gina was instrumental in helping me become not only a better writer, but a better person. After college, I went into publishing, and then we later reconnected over Indian food. Another thing you might not know about Gina is her love of Indian food. And if you're ever lucky enough to see her office at UConn, then the love of her students. It's all over the walls. It's all over the room. It's just an expression. We reconnected, started talking about books and humor, and together we came up with the idea for Fast Funny Women, which you can see over my shoulder, and you might even see there's a cookie that I still haven't eaten. Gina, I don't think you've eaten yours yet either, from a big event we had. It was just, they put the book cover on the cookie. It was amazing. So it's a hilarious collection of nonfiction essays from contributors. Please check it out if you want. We have an upcoming Fast Fierce Women publishing spring 22. So keep your eyes open for the Fast Women franchise that's spearheaded by Gina, because you may want to be a contributor for it in the future. So please allow me the honor and privilege to welcome Gina Barreca, and thank you all again for being here today. Gina?
Oh, thank you so much. Dave was really one of, they're all the favorites, but Dave was such an interesting young man, and he was very different from who he is now. And I just sent him a note the other day saying, I would like to go back and tell the 20-year-old Dave Legere who he would be now. And that young man would be so happy and relieved and delighted. And you know, it's those different moments of, we could go back and tap ourselves on the shoulder and say, it'll be all right, kid. You're really going to be doing just fine. And more than that, you're going to be having an enormously rich life with all of these people in it. And I think you would have found it surprising at that point. But sometimes we need to sneak those little moments from the future and the past. It's sort of not like deja vu. It's sort of like, you know, après vu or something, avant vu, that you need to get that little moment. But I am absolutely delighted to be here for Woodhall's conference and to open up the day and to see so many people. I recognize some of them in the gallery of faces who are up there, and are some whom I believe that I've read in my time. And so that's an honor too.
I like you already, Gina, because you like Indian food and I am an Indian.
That's right. That's good. And the idea that that we want to come together and figure out how to get not only words from inside our heads, inside ourselves, onto the page, but then get the words from the page into the hands of other readers. Because, you know, I often, I have lots of discussions with people that I take very seriously, not only in the organized real classrooms at the University of Connecticut, where I've taught since 1987, and taught creative writing as well as teaching literature. But when I do conferences, when I am in, even in Facebook, I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm 64 years old. That's sort of my generation's playground. And I put up a question about, for example, I put up one that's like, what do you consider a writer? And the real question, and I think it's something for everybody who wants to write, it's a question that we should be able to address, and I hope that, you know, will be addressed throughout the day. What is a writer? Is it somebody who has ideas about stories they want to tell? That's one part of it, or about poems they want to write, about narratives they want to construct. Is it a writer who manages to get those onto the page in some way? Is the page now still the only venue for the writer? I mean, if you want to write screenplays, you still have to get them onto the page first, right? So is it getting it onto the page? Or is it that moment you become a writer when somebody else reads your work? Okay. I tend to think when I come down on those conversations, and it's not always a popular, though it doesn't always make me the most fun kid in the room, but I think that you're a writer when other people read your work, not only when you write it down for yourself. It doesn't end, the process of writing doesn't end when you get it down on the page. It ends when you can make somebody else understand what you're saying, where somebody else gets it. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a producer in Hollywood. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It could be somebody in your writing group, as in we could talk about writing groups, but only if the writing group is honest. And it's not just a bunch of people going, wow, that made me feel really sad. Or, oh, that was even better than the last one you wrote that made me feel sad. But when people are saying that second paragraph, that was, you don't need that at all. That was just something you put in there because you've been dragging that idea around about seeing somebody with a purple hat. That guy with the purple hat shows up in everything that you've written for the last 3 months, and you're never going to be able to fit in the guy with the purple hat. He has nothing to do with anything you're writing. I know you like that description. Take it out, which is what Oscar Wilde and a bunch of other writers would call killing your darlings. You have to get rid of the stuff that you're dragging around like some favorite pair of earrings that, you know, half of the rhinestones have dropped out and you're still trying to get it in and it looks terrible and it doesn't work and you're still dragging them around. It's like idea hoarding. You ever watch that TV show Hoarding, where people have all of that stuff and it's on the stairways and, you know, the rooms can no longer be used for their appropriate stuff. I mean, if you have stories that you are just trying to fit into other stories, but are no longer able to actually be the story they're supposed to be because you were trying to make them into other things, that's like idea hoarding. And you need to go through it and figure out like, what's a keep, what's a save, what's a dump, what do you got to give away? You know, you need to go through your sort of your arsenal of what you're writing and really look at the stuff cautiously. And that's one of the things about, again, writing groups or classes, is that if everybody's just giving you praise, they're not doing you any good. We all need to hear somebody saying, that part's not working. And not to hear that criticism as unkindness, but to hear that criticism as the thing that it is, which is useful. So again, is the writer, at what point does something become a piece of writing? Is it when somebody else can really understand it? Is it when somebody else has an emotional reaction to it? When they have sort of like even deeper, like an instinctive reaction to it? It's a tough process. And so figuring out what you consider to be a writer is a real start. Like, what is a writer? Not who is a writer. I'm not even asking that question of like, who's your favorite author? But if somebody says to you, what's a writer? And the second half of that question is, what do you consider a successful writer? Who is a successful writer? And what makes that idea of success? It's tough. Some of you I know have been published already, and it's a great feeling when you see something in print or on the screen, and those are your words, and those are there, and they have the validation of some kind of framework around it, whether it's the page or on the screen, and that that strangers, I mean, not just people that you have to strong arm into reading something, but actually strangers are picking up of their own volition and reading your words and taking them in. But then there's the question of, okay, then it's never enough, because you want to know what the next thing is, right? You've written something, but now what's the next thing you're working on? And how is that going to change what you're thinking about? How is that going to form your future? So when I write, it's in, one of the things about doing stuff on Zoom is being able to show you sort of a little bit when they talk about process. I could show you a little process. I could show you my messy room, but I take everything down. My first piece of information for anybody, if we're looking for things, is that you write everything down. Now, when I'm talking about hoarding, I mean, you can hear things falling in the background. You can see pieces of paper. Remember onion skin? Some of you remember onion skin, typing on onion skin? Are there a few of you who are old enough to remember actually typing in the typewriter and the sound that onion skin makes? It was erasable, right? I have the letters. This one was from September 28th, 1979, from my brother. This is all the stuff right here. This is what I'm working on immediately. I literally have pieces of paper where I write things down, because if you don't write it down, it will go away. You can't just have an idea in your head that you think you'll be able to sustain. You have to write everything down at the moment, because if you don't, you're not going to remember it in the immediacy and with the power that you first encountered it. What everybody else accomplishes is the real something for sloth. So that I'm writing about sloth. I did a series of articles for the Chicago Tribune on the 7 deadly sins. And one of the things that I'm sure you already know that happens when you write is that once you have an idea, you have an organizing idea, when things are going well, everything fits into that organizing idea. So I have 7,000 pages of everything. And if I'm writing about the 7 deadly sins, everything in my world suddenly becomes about sloth, greed, anger, lust, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that is my world anyway, even if I'm not writing about the 7 deadly sins, that's pretty much it. But that I'm taking notes as I'm going. So I'm overhearing conversations and I'm getting out pieces of paper. I know that some people do it on their phone, but I'm writing on the backs of receipts. When I had matchbooks, I'd be writing inside the matchbooks, but it's taking everything down and not trusting your later self to remember, oh, that conversation those 2 women were having behind me in the restaurant. That was, what was it they were saying? But getting their lines, you know, specifically, so that you are like capturing them and that you can bring them sort of gently into the natural habitat that is your page. It's like you are creating this world where these things are going to live, these words, these stories, these ideas, these passages are going to live. And that particularly, I'm, you know, as some of you might know, I'm particularly interested in humor. And it really is important in terms of humor, because in much writing, but I think particularly in humor writing, that timing is everything, right? To get the timing right, especially if you're writing dialogue, you're writing conversation, and you're telling a funny story, that you need to build in the timing somehow on the page, so that the way that the story goes gives people room to react, so that they can get the funny part, and it gives them, you know, the space, the air they need to actually be able to enjoy it, to laugh. And often that will have to be duplicated, maybe exactly from writing down the thing that made you find it funny in the first place. And then you go and then you exaggerate it, then you polish it, then you push up this part, and you push this part down, but you form it, you make it yourself. Another part about writing that I think it's always important to mention, especially at the beginning of a day like today, which will be so exciting, is that for all of the great techniques and ideas and everything else that we'll be talking about in terms of writing as art and craft and job and work and calling, is that nothing except writing is writing. That's really one of the hard things to accept. And it's something I actually have it written right here above my computer, because I need to remind myself that nothing except writing is writing. Taking notes is kind of a writing. You know, reading, spent my life, my day job, you know, reading, doing research. Oh, God, the seductions of doing research are amazing. All of those things are not writing. Only when you're sitting down and your hands are on the keyboard and you are putting one word after the other is that actually writing. And there are so many other things that we can sort of justify as helping our writing, but it's also, we have to stop like believing our own sort of hype and actually go like, okay, I spent 6 hours at the computer today, putting one word after the other. And sometimes that might feel like, you know, in Stephen King's brilliant, a lot of Stephen King's novels really are about writing, but the one that I've taught 2 of King's novels, and the graduate students get very huffy because they're like, I'm in graduate school, how could I be reading Stephen King? It's like, honey, this is a book about writing. It is right up there with George Gissing's New Grub Street. And it's The Shining, and where you'll remember that when his wife, Wendy, discovers the manuscript that he's been working on, it was just one line after the other is all work, but no play makes Jack a dull boy. But he's been working on this over and over again. The other book of King's that focuses on writing is Misery, which I think anybody who's ever tried to write a book has their own version of Misery. And but it really works about, you know, writing for your fan, your number one fan, right? You're writing for the outsider who expects something of you as a writer. And Stephen King's book called On Writing is a book that I teach. I think it's smart, it's effective, it's clear, and it's useful. The other book that I use for my creative writing classes at UConn, both at the graduate and undergraduate level, is a book by Betsy Lerner, who is one of the country's top agents. And Betsy Lerner wrote a book called The Forest for the Trees. And I would recommend this in terms of, not only does she talk about different kinds of writers, it's incredibly informed, some of the best quotations you'll ever read about writing and writers and the lives of writers, like how you accept this bizarre world, stuff that you're choosing to do, but also about what it's like to send out a query letter, what it's like to make contact with publishers, the people that you're going to be you know, the people that you're going to be dealing with, like some of the folks here from Woodhall Press. But how do you form this amorphous thing that has lived inside you, this work of creativity, into a product? Because finally, it is astonishing to think that publishers don't do what they do for free. They are actually intending to make a profit. It doesn't always happen, but that is the intention. And how does this work? How does this go from this amorphous piece of art into something that becomes a product that is on a shelf? And so Betsy Lerner does a terrific job with that. So those are the two that I recommend. And in terms of my own, you know, the counsel that I always give, and that I found to be effective with other writers that I work with, and the people in, so as Dave mentioned, the most recent book that came out last year, I'm very proud of, is Fast, Funny Women. And it's 75 essays by some of the great writers. Some of them are great writers that you know, because they won the Pulitzer Prize, like Jane Smiley, or have been New York Times bestsellers, like Marge Piercy, part of the Academy of American Poets, Faye Weldon, who wrote the opening pilot for Upstairs, Downstairs. Sort of, again, if you're a certain age, you'll know that she basically brought, you know, British TV to America with Upstairs, Downstairs, wrote Life and Loves of a She-Devil. Mimi Pond, who's a New Yorker cartoonist, did the cover for us. There are a lot of other cartoonists and writers in the book. It's an astonishing collection. And there are 18-year-olds. There are young writers that you've never heard from. There are 57-year-olds. There are women it's all women who have been writing their whole lives but never got a chance to publish before. And the book that's coming out next year is Fast, Fierce Women. And those are some scary stories, but they're stories of courage and bravery, and whether that comes from days where you needed to get up to take a shower, to days when you needed to get yourself out of a relationship that would destroy you, or to get into an argument that was going to change your life. And in Writer's Digest, which I did a piece for based on this book, is the idea of that, especially in writing short pieces, but it goes for long pieces as well. What we're trying to do in all our work, and feel free to disagree, I'll leave some time for question and answers, I'd love to have a conversation, is to, again, engage with somebody through our words that is a real conversation. Where somebody feels that they're whether it's a piece of fiction or nonfiction, but they want to talk back. You know, they want to see how the writer got to that point of view, and then say, but when this happened to me, then this happened, and they want to figure out what's going on. It doesn't just stay inside the page. It really does leap off. It's a dance. That's why your writing is sort of, you know, it's one part of a dance. And so you have to anticipate your partner, and to understand that your partner is going to bring their own sense of rhythm and choreography, and they're going to hear the music slightly differently. But while they're reading your work, you're sort of wrapped in each other's arms. So you need to make room. You need to anticipate who that partner is going to be, that reader is going to be. And you don't want to enter that relationship in an antagonistic way. I've dealt with writers, and interestingly enough, sometimes it's the youngest writers, because they have nothing to lose. They have, they come full of confidence. Sometimes it's earned and sometimes it isn't. And it's like, well, if they don't understand what I'm saying, I don't care. I know what I mean. And it's like, okay, you're not going to dance. You're going to sit by yourself, you know, next to the punch bowl, because you need to have somebody become engaged with your work. And so if somebody's really not, if you can't make it so they don't hear your beat, or they can't move with you, or there's no space, or you're taking up all the beats and your arms are wrapped around like this, then you're not going to get a lot of takers. So you need to be expansive. There's a generosity that comes in telling the story. And so the piece that I wrote for Writer's Digest, which you can find very easily if you just Google it, but they're tips on writing particularly fast fiction and nonfiction. And try to make the point that every piece of writing should hold a mirror up to life. And that what fast fiction and nonfiction does is to hold a compact mirror up to life. So you still see a picture of yourself. It's just a smaller picture of yourself. And it's fun to work with these structures for, again, these remarkable writers, working with James Smiley. All the pieces that were done for the book are done originally for the book. So these people took on the task of writing a new piece. Marge Piercy, who is one of my favorite writers in the world, said, yeah, I'll do it. Which, you know, made my day, to put it mildly. But then they had to fit in the structure of the 750 words. That was the one thing that I insisted. And so to have to work with writers, and some of whom I've admired my entire adult life, and say, you know, actually, that's like 790 words and we need to cut it. You know, that's your work as an editor too. That's your work as somebody putting together something inside a certain genre or choosing what kind of genre you want to work in. But again, it's all engagement, and engagement is really part of the fun part. So are we able, Christopher, I see that you're there, or Dave, are we able to take question and answers? I mean, I could talk for 3 days. So, I mean, I'm not like at a loss for that, but Becca, can we do questions and answers, or should I'll keep talking until someone.
Becca, Becca, how's the time? I'm just chiming in because if we have time, let's do Q&A.
Yeah.
We're good.
We have a half an hour, right? I usually like to leave.
Yeah, yeah.
That's to be the fun part. You can talk with your mouth full, it's fine. But what questions do you have about writing? Again, I can do this for hours, but I'm seeing engaged people. I'm seeing like Sarah looks like she's got a question. Am I right? Sarah looks like I've been teaching for too long. I can see Patricia looks like she's got a question, but people are like, I don't want to put my hand up. I'm going to be the first one, but it's like at school. I'm going to call on you if you look like you have a question. So, all right. So who was it that had the question before?
Sarah has a question.
Sarah, please.
Hi. So I'm a grad student. I'm getting my MFA in poetry, and something I've personally always struggled with, which you actually, you know, just touched on, is the balance between that, like trying to create things that everyone understands, but then have something that's like, well, I don't know, like I understand it. I don't need to please anyone. And the people who my work needs to find will be found. Like, but do you know like where that balance is? Like, you know, if something like that I feel like is really working, like say my own brand of like the guy with the purple hat. Like if I feel like that line or like that idea has to work, I have to make it work. Where is the line that I don't keep trying to make it work, or keep trying to make everyone be on the same plane that I am?
That's a great question. So thank you, first of all, for that. And I think that what you started, just how you started this discussion, is where it gets like to the root of it. We get way, way, way down. It's that sense of, as a writer, I think most of us have with us this need to have somebody understand, right? And then an almost anticipatory defiance that nobody's going to understand. And that those two things go together. I mean, as much as like it's like two hands go together. And, you know, and that in the worst moments, that becomes then, why the hell am I doing this? Right? Those are the worst days where you feel like you're never going to be able to bring those things together. So why make it bother? I'm never going to be able to translate these actual emotions or these feelings or this idea into this narrow piece of language. And so I do think that the purple hat guy, I mean, he's as vivid as he is because he's there. He's just the embodiment of, you know, somebody that can't be integrated into again, everything that everybody's trying to do, but I think he's sort of necessary. He might be the muse. I'm not sure who that guy is. But I think that it's often in the place that we think people won't get us, and I mean this from my heart, where it's the most personal, the most, certainly not the most esoteric, but the most honest, the most unbearably vulnerable, apparently, sui generis, those moments that you think no one else has ever felt, that people then go, God, that's how I feel. So for years, I wrote weekly columns that were syndicated around the country. And there would be times where I'd be trying to talk to about a big topic to a large group, and I'd get comments and arguments and the rest of it. And then there would be one that would be about some strange little thing, and hundreds of people would write. Like, I think I wrote about like finding an earring and whether I had to, was it up to me to go try to like go to local places and return the earring to, it was like outside a church. Was I supposed to put up things? I just took the earring home and then feel guilty about it? Something like that. Hundreds of people told their stories about finding an object and then not knowing what to do with it. I had no idea that was like an untapped source of guilt in American people's lives. So it's like the thing that, in a way, the thing that you don't think people are going to get that happens just to you is the part that people are going to get. And so it's when the defiance comes in, when you feel the defiance, I know that for me, the defiance kicks in when something in me knows that it's not working. Because the other stuff is just like, it runs on its own gas. It like the lost earring part, like that just like wrote itself. And it's like, okay, this is not great, but it's this, but it's somehow struck all of these chords where the stuff that I have worked so hard and carefully on and made sure that, it was, sort of arctically pure and crystalline and everything. People are like, hey, it's fine. Nothing. So that's where those reactions, I don't know if that helps, Sarah. Does that sort of address your question?
Absolutely. Like I feel I was like being vulnerable. Oh no, like anything but that.
Yeah.
But at the same time it does like, absolutely help, because I'm always wondering like, oh, like the things that are too heavy, the things that my closest friends and my mom and even my therapist like cringe like when they hear. Yep. I'm like, how are people gonna pay for this? How are my fellow workshoppers even going to want to hear it, without complaining to my professor? So, but the fact that that is the thing, like the thing that I'm terrified of is the thing to,
That's
so
it's
more anxiety for me, but
no, but Sarah, honest to God, that's the part you have to run towards. And it is because it's the only part it's really the only part that matters. And it's so hard to do that. It's so hard to do that. And again, in the Betsy Lerner book, she has one of my favorite sections. And when I have the students read it, it's one that usually affects them deeply. It's called The Good Child. And then she talks about having, receiving as an agent, hundreds of manuscripts, literally hundreds of manuscripts every week that are perfectly well written, that have good stories, that have strong writing, and that, they can pass around in the office and go, here's another perfectly fine book that no one will read that is written by a good child. That's not it. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a perfectly nice book that no one will read. It has a nice little story. It has whatever. That's not it. And it's not about some self-excoriation. It's not about auto-da-fe. It's not, it's not about setting fire to yourself in the town square, but it is about finding the thing that you're writing around and actually writing about that. And it's so that she in Lerner, Lerner's discussion of the good child, she talks about, the fear of not being welcome back at the table if you tell the truth, not being do this. Now, my personal response to like, what do people say in your family when they react to your books? It's like in my family, my working class Italian, French Canadian family, all my family want are to be given copies of the books. And as far as I can tell, nobody's ever read them. I have a brother who reads them. Nobody else ever read the book. All the stuff that I worried about, what they might think about what I said about family, it's on page 226. They never got to page 226. They thumbed through to see if I used real names. I didn't use real names. They read the first 5 pages and the last 5 pages. And on some of the houses, it would be like on the bookcase, in sort of like a place that you could see. Some I think they used, to prop up the, the table at the end. So it really was not some big expose because they really didn't read, and so didn't get to other stories. But people might have more attentive families than my own. I understand. But I wouldn't worry so much about that. I would worry about making sure that the story is the real story. And then that's where you got it. All right, Anita. Hi, Anita.
Hi, Regina. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to ask you a question, sort of twofold on your abilities as a writer and your abilities as a teacher. I am an emerging writer, although I've been writing all my life, but I I've been given the gift of time by God due to an illness. So I'm like starting to really dig in, and I'm really excited about it. I also facilitate an online global writers group for Black people globally in an effort to really try to boost our work getting out there and all of that. So here's the thing that I'm struggling with a little bit, both in my own writing, because I'm in multiple writing groups, all different kinds, mixed and not, and within my group, my little budding group, in terms of critique. So like I've heard the philosophy before of people saying, I guess there's a philosophy where you only give positive feedback. And I actually kind of adhere to that a little bit in our group, only because I find that a lot of times writers of color haven't gotten the confidence that they need to really just get it on the page. Mm-hmm. Just feel free to just get it out there. And that's what we need to do. So I don't want to like hinder that. So, but then in my own writing too, like, I'm just balancing, like, I want to hear critique because I want to get better. I want to continue to learn. It's just sometimes it feels like critique can come in a way where it's like, well, they don't understand some of the concepts or culture, and so I'm trying to figure out how to navigate taking constructive feedback, giving constructive feedback, and when my alarm should go off that's like, that's not, that's actually not really valid feedback. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you mean. Now I mean, you're talking about very complicated topics, and it's great that you're doing this. So you are giving a gift to those writers you're working with. So thank you for doing that. And you were taking on the heavy lifting because you're doing the administrative and organizing part of it, which is thankless. And so you get real extra credit. And Becca and everybody else setting up this conference will tell you that any of us who have ever done anything know that that's the hard part, is to get people in one room at one period of time and get them doing stuff is really almost impossible. But when that magic happens, it's great. Now, what I have learned to do, and again, it may not work, but I've had students who have then gone on to find their own, start their own writing groups. And I've worked certainly in this book and in the next book. I have many writers of color, many women of color, and written some of the most brilliant stuff that's there. Everybody gets in the writing I do it in a class officially, but when I do, let's say, a 3-day writers conference, like if I'm doing like go to a place and do like the Pacific Writers Conference, and we're all there together for 3 days. I have a sheet. Everybody fills out the same 5 questions about everybody's work. Everybody. So that you get, this is not contemporaneous sort of reactions. You get, people do not read their work out loud, because in fact, that is not the venue that most people's work will be encountered. It will be encountered on the page. And so everybody gets copies of the work from their colleagues, from the people in the group. And then when we come in to meet, they come in with written responses to their colleagues' work. And that all of these are, they're simple questions, but they're useful. So what is the best line? Okay, like what is the best line? Okay, like this is where, so you start with the positive part that you're talking about. It's like, this is where you land. This is the line where you nail it. This is, if you were, like if this is going in a magazine, this would be the one that the line they pull out and put in the box. Like this is the line, right? So then what line should you ditch? What line should you take out or rework entirely? So there has to be one that's terrific. There has to be one that goes. Everybody has to pick some that goes, and then everybody will hear that it more often than not, everybody likes the same line, but people will not like different lines, right? So again, so everybody will get a sheet with 5 questions, and I can post those. I can do a piece that I'll do it up at, I write for Psychology Today. People can come to my Psychology Today posts. I'll do one today where I'll put up those 5 questions so that the people from, yes, hi, Amy. Yes, good. I can do that with the 5 questions. So what line work? What line doesn't? What is, you have to give, you don't give a title to your piece, but everybody else has to give a title. Oh. Because when other people, first of all, that'll be what happens, right? Other people title your work. In book publishing, titles are usually considered a marketing decision. Titles are negotiable. Almost no book I've ever published with a major 5 house, with Simon & Schuster, Harper & Row, Penguin. Titles, you come up with, it's like big marketing. They want to know how this is going to fly. So other people title the work, because then you hear what other people see as what your piece is about. It may be very different, because again, it's a translation. All of writing is translation. Okay. And then, when you have those 5 questions that everybody's had to answer, then you don't get into like a discussion about it. You hear it, and then everybody's thrown their stuff into the pot, and then you can discuss it as a group. And everybody gets attention, and everybody, and you're in that cone of silence when it's you that's being discussed, so you don't argue back. But it's, I found that to be very useful in terms of keeping the criticism, and that way there's not one person who takes over the criticism because she or he is the one person. Like usually there's somebody who's like, no, this is what you have to do. It's like, honey, shut up. Okay. She's actually a much more astute reader than you are, but you have never learned to shut the hell up. So can you let her speak? So this way, if everybody's got those answers, then at least it also gives a sort of play, fair playing, group. So yes, you come out of, so I'm just looking at the bottom. I didn't quite hear it, but you have to come out of the cone of silence only after your piece is done, but you don't spend your time refuting what other people have said, because the idea is then you take their criticism, into you. You're like a piece of blotter paper there, and then you decide what to do with it. You don't have to take any of it, but it's good for you to hear it. It's really essential for you to hear it. Does that help?
Amazing feedback. Thank you for those nuggets. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you. I think that there was somebody else. Did we have a question? Yolanda has Oh, there are many questions on the side. Sorry, I wasn't seeing any of these. Differences between language, cone of silence. Yeah, I'm a real cone of silence fan. I don't want to hear, and I don't want to be asked to refute or rebut. I see the interaction with the critics as one way also of learning to accept criticism, learning to not only accept it, but to use it. Criticism is feedback. And that's what we need as writers, because we spend so much time inside our heads, and because we spend a lot of time with the voices that usually voices for writers are either or. Either you have just written actually something amazing, and this is really it. You got to the part where this, like, you've really made it. This is just what you've been hoping for. Or you have gotten to the moment when you realize you're no good. This is terrible. What kind of crap is it that you've been doing? Who are you kidding? And it's those two voices in your own head. It's very hard to get a moderate voice in your own head about your own work. So listening carefully, right? To what other people are saying about your work, knowing you are not going to respond to it, puts you in a different position as an active listener. If it's going to be some kind of position where you're going to respond, you're not listening, you're waiting your turn. And that's a much less effective position to be in terms of actually gathering and making use of the information. Okay, so I'm just looking at a couple of, so Yolanda, I still don't, what's Craft in the Real World by Michael Matthew Salisis? I don't know that, but good. I'm glad there's one out there. Okay, hold on. If somebody asks me, this is,
Gina,
yeah.
oh, there's a couple hands raised. Regina's had her hand up for a little bit.
Okay, you can see that better than I can?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Regina, because I have tiny pieces, so I'm not.
I gotcha.
All right, thank you, Dave. Hi, Regina.
Hi, Regina.
Hello.
What a great name. Okay.
Yeah, are we lucky?
So, yep. For me, you know, life happens gumbo yaya. A lot of stories happen at once. There's a whole bunch of ethnic women in the kitchen cooking, and if you stop any of them, we all know what's going on. We all know the story. I tend to try to write like that. In my writing group, the constant feedback I get just from two people who definitely are the most linear thinkers, but maybe I'm taking it too much to heart because I've started to lose confidence. They go, Regina, that's really 4 stories. They might be right. I don't know. But anything that you have to say on telling a bunch of related stories at once. So for example, one story that I turned into 2 that I still kind of regret doing that. But I listened to the feedback. I always be, okay, try it that way. Try it the editor's way, try it the critic's way. See how you like it. Just go ahead and do it. Was my story, it's a memoir, of course, on which I embellish about being a colored child in the 50s and 60s, being taught that I was responsible for representing my race, so I had to be perfect. But then I also had to hold the hand and accompany a young girl neighbor with an intellectual disability to school, in those days called mental retardation. So I'm going through the shame over Cynthia, and I've got to make up for her and be a credit to my race. And that is directly related to my hating math, not doing well in it, failing my race because of math, and still trying to take care of Cynthia and not let the little white boys beat her up. Well, the group is like, Regina, one story is about math and how you hate technology. The other story is about Cynthia. Any advice on putting something like that together? And then, if I may add to that, how much should one explain colloquialisms? Okay,
those are, I can see what people are saying just because in that you've got a bunch of different questions. So let me try to, okay, I'm gonna unweave that thing. We'll take one piece at a time. colloquialisms, the richness of a local language or a dialect or the way people speak can be beautifully done, as long as it is understandable to your audience. So you have to figure out how you're introducing this to your audience. And the thing about doing that is having to be consistent. So that, for example, you read Zora Neale's Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the great novels of all time. So that her narrator, you'll notice, I mean, right from the beginning of that book, her narrator has a beautiful lyrical sort of effective way of putting things out. But then when we're hearing the words from the mouths of the characters themselves, they're speaking as they would speak, you know, so that you've got, even if we're talking about the same thing, but you have the description of that third person narrator, right, in conventional language. But then when you have the character speaking to themselves, they go into their own, their own language, and you hear in another way, and it adds like another dimension to the book. And there are lots of books that do that, where the characters go into their own speech, so that you combine with the sort of the narrative that is sort of easy to follow and conventionally written, with the richness of the locale and the language that people really use. In the first essay in Fast Funny Women, there's a woman writing about how gumbo was my valley. She talked, which is it's a wonderful essay by someone who's a stand-up comic, but about a neighborhood and the coming together and then the falling apart of things. And so that when you're talking about, let's say, the story of your childhood, that one of the temptations when writing a memoir, personal history, which I did about my years at college as a working class kid at college, is to try to figure out, again, what your perspective is going to be, and to try to make sure that you're not telling your story today. So like you have trouble with technology, that doesn't belong in the story about fourth grade math.
Gotcha.
But story about fourth grade math, if that is affected by the fact that you couldn't pay attention because you were, you were actually doing emotional management for a child, something else, so that, that literally you want to find some metaphor, right, Regina, some kind of image, so that nothing in your life could add up, right?
Gotcha.
Something like that, so that your life, they were trying to make life into a, 2 + 2 = 4. But what happens when you add in this kid that you're supposed to be doing? What happens when you add in this expectation of race? What happens when you add in that this is not part of the mathematics that they were handing you out in these equations, that they were leaving out all the variables?
Got it.
Right? Something like that.
That's perfect.
Okay, so like finding actually the language that could make those two trajectories of a story into one. It will often, the language itself could harness them. But part of it will be figuring out, okay, it's this part of the story, but I'm not going to be able to talk about technology, why I can't get my phone to work. That's going to be a different.
Right.
That's got to be a different piece. But good for you for doing it. Right? This is
all right, Gina, we've got 5 minutes, and I think Lori is up next. I saw her, she was in line.
Hi, Lori. Where's Lori?
Hi, Gina.
Hi, Lori.
Thanks for answering my question. I was a marketing writer and have written a lot of stories about, more content writing than copy, authenticity makers. And I'm making the transition into life coaching right now, and I'm writing a self-help book. And one of the challenges for me is that while I've read a bunch of self-help books, I kind of find them cringeworthy in terms of the quality of writing. And I'm noticing that as I just started my outline and just took a stab at my my introduction, and I was like, ugh, it's really hard to find that you know, all of the fun literary tricks, it's hard to weave them into this new genre for me. So do you have any advice?
Yes, advice for advice giving. It really is the and again, some of the books that I've written, I mean, one of the early ones was, they used to call me Snow White But I Drifted, Women's Strategic Use of Humor, and then Perfect Husbands and Other Fairy Tales, which is what got me out to Oprah the first time. And, you know, they're self-helpy, but they're not so self-helpy, you know. It's really, I think, the best of those kinds of books, and some of them are great, is where you can tell, unlike what the other kind of writing you were doing, you're not just providing content, right? You're not just, and I think that that's got to be from you telling your story. I mean, I know the reason that these books, you know, those books got sold at auction by my agent for reasonable amounts of money was because there was a real person behind that. So they want, especially if you're going to go and give talks or, you know, do coaching, that they want the you behind that. Because the advice, again, I don't know you, but the advice that we give, it's not that it can't be found elsewhere, but you're putting it together in a particular way so that people have access to it in a new way that'll make their lives better. And the idea that you'll stand behind it as you know, so that, do you tell your own story about how you came to write this book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then I would say that that's, you know, that's a big part of it. Can you give us a one sentence version? When people, you know, all of these books tell you what's your elevator pitch, but whenever I do help, and again, I've been very lucky, and many of my students or friends have gone on to publish. I've had small parts in helping them with this, but the whole business of, like, in one sentence, what does your book do, is something everybody should be able to say in one sentence. And it's the same kind of thing of when people say, it's like, your book should be able to demonstrate this in the first 3 pages, because nobody's going to read past the first 3 pages. You can't write something and then say, oh, it really gets going in chapter 3. No, that's done. You can't say it. It just doesn't work. So Lori, what's your book? What's your book in one sentence?
Basically, it's reframing the midlife crisis and turning it into a point of opportunity.
Okay. How is it different from the other midlife crises book?
It's more of a how-to. So there's a little bit of a workbooky element to it as well. There's pros and using real tools and techniques, not just talking about what people in midlife are facing.
Okay. All right. What I would want, if I were giving you the coaching session, I want lots more specific. So if you have been the woman in the purple hat until you were 38, and you suddenly recognize that you are no longer the ingenue, you are no longer, you know, who is being addressed in TV commercials, you are no longer, you know, but you are too old for work study and too young for cremation, you know, then this is the book for you, you know, I mean, but somehow, like, some kind of specificity where saying there will also be worksheets doesn't have the kind of drama and sexiness that you're really going to need to make this work. So what is it about you and about this that's really going to make somebody go, wow, this is different from all those other ones out there? And because that is, and what's going to be different is the fact that you're writing it. So that's why I'm saying that's how all of our books are going to be different from everybody else's, is because we're doing them. But that's why that essential, when people talk about finding your voice, because it is that every editor, agent, and reader is looking for, is for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I see Becca's back here. Hi, Becca.
Sorry. Hi.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Gina. You're amazing. I could listen to you talk for hours. We could probably have you just talk the whole conference. It would be fantastic. So thank you so much for your wonderful insights, and for making us laugh, and for starting off this conference so well. And spending the time to be with us.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. And again, people can they can email me. They can find my stuff. You know, it's easy to find. But I answer my emails. So follow me on Facebook, and I answer my emails. And I know it's going to be a great day. I'm going to be on and off all day, so I'm going to be paying attention. So I look forward to learning more.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
All right. Sorry for those of you if we didn't get to your questions. Again, you feel free to email Gina. So we're going to head into the breakouts. For those of you who are full conference attendees, you will be sent into your breakout rooms now with your workshop leaders. If you are just if you're just here for the panels and the keynotes, you can feel free to take a little break, and you can rejoin us at 11 o'clock for the Future of Writing panel.